The chilling echo of cruel laughter shattered the silence of the Texas night, echoing across the desolate plains like a ghostly curse. Clara Dawson lay trembling and helpless on the dusty ground of a makeshift camp, her body battered and bruised. Hours ago, her captor had torn her dress to shreds, leaving her clutching only a filthy, ragged towel that offered no real cover. His rough hands pressed down with savage force, his foul breath reeking of whiskey as he tried to overpower her. "They're gonna kill us," she whispered, her cracked lips trembling, eyes wide with raw terror. The words escaped her in a broken croak, almost too faint to be heard, yet they sliced through the darkness like a blade. Meanwhile, Abigail Moore, just 23 but hardened by weeks of captivity, stood frozen at the sound of her friend's voice. Her wrists were raw from the rough ropes biting into her skin. But in that moment, something inside her snapped. With a surge of desperate fury, she lunged forward, snatched a jagged rock from the dirt, and drove it with all her might against the man's temple. His body crumpled instantly, his sneer wiped clean from his face, replaced by a stunned silence. Clara gasped, clutching her torn towel tighter around her battered frame, while Abigail seized her arm and yanked her toward the shadows, away from the chaos. They staggered through the tall, brittle grass, barefoot and trembling, their skin torn by thorns and rough stones, every breath ragged with fear. Behind them, the flickering glow of the traffickers' campfires danced like sinister eyes, voices rising in frantic shouts as the gang realized 2 of their prisoners had vanished into the night. "They'll find us," Clara choked out, stumbling against Abigail's shoulder. "They'll come for us and make us pay." But Abigail's grip tightened, her voice a fierce whisper amid the chaos. "Not if we keep moving. Not if we don't stop." Her words trembled, but her eyes burned with unwavering resolve. The 2 young women pushed forward into the endless darkness of the Texas plains, the moon casting faint, silvery light over their trembling forms, barely enough to reveal the fear etched into each face. Their bodies bore the marks of brutality, bruises, blood, and the fraying edges of hope. Yet somehow, they kept running. Hours blurred into an eternity of silence, broken only when Clara finally collapsed, her strength spent. Abigail dropped to her knees beside her, chest heaving, torn between dragging her further or hiding in the shadows. That was when the distant pounding of hooves shattered the stillness. Out of the darkness emerged a tall horse, its muscles rippling beneath a rider with graying hair and eyes that carried the weight of countless battles. Elias Carter, a rancher and a veteran of wars long past, hardened by years yet unbroken by them. He reined in his horse, staring down at the 2 women sprawled helpless in the dust, faces streaked with dirt and blood, bearing the silent testament of a nightmare too terrible for words. For the first time that night, Abigail's defenses cracked, and her voice broke with raw pleading. "Please, help us." Elias dismounted slowly, his gaze narrowing as he took in the scene. Elias crouched low beside the 2 young women, his worn boots sinking deep into the cracked, sun-baked Texas dirt. Clara clung to her towel, her trembling body betraying every ounce of fear she fought to hide, while Abigail held her chin high, trying to mask the dread lurking behind her eyes. Elias had seen terror before, plenty of it, back in the chaos of war. But something about these girls felt different. A quiet, raw desperation clung to them like dust in the wind. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a battered canteen, offering it with steady hands. Abigail was the first to take it, helping Clara to sip like an older sister guiding her through a storm. Though Elias could see Clara was just a shade younger, Abigail's voice cracked as she spoke, strained but determined. "They're not just any outlaws," she whispered, voice trembling. "Their leader, he's got a scar running from his eye down to his jaw. And when he talks, it's slow, heavy, like he's weighing every word, like he's always calculating his next move." Elias's breath caught. That voice, those features, he'd never forget them. Because he knew that scar, that voice. His stomach clenched tight, as if someone had driven a blade straight through his gut. He looked away, jaw clenched, knowing some truths were better left buried. Not yet. Not here. All they needed now was a roof over their heads, a breath of safety. "Come on," Elias said softly, rising and offering a rough, calloused hand. "You're safe now. My ranch isn't far. No one's going to hurt you again while I'm around." Abigail hesitated, then took his hand, helping Clara to her feet. They stumbled toward the horse, Elias walking beside them for a moment, the weight of unspoken secrets hanging heavy in the air. In Clara's tired eyes flickered a faint glimmer of hope, just a flicker, but enough to catch Abigail's notice. She let out a shaky laugh, half relief, half disbelief, as if daring to believe they might have found someone who could truly keep them alive. But Elias's mind was far from settled. Every step toward the ranch pressed down harder on his conscience. If Nathaniel Carter, the man these girls were running from, was truly involved, blood would be spilled. Family blood. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. He cast a glance at Abigail, dirt smudged across her face, her spirit flickering beneath all that pain. She had no idea that the man hunting her was no ordinary outlaw. Would she still trust him if she knew the truth buried deep inside his heart? The ride back was painfully quiet. Too quiet. Elias kept a steady hand on the reins, while Abigail and Clara huddled close behind him, shadows merging in the darkness. The cool night air weighed heavy, like an invisible cloak stitched with dread. As the ranch house finally loomed into view, Abigail's eyelids drooped, exhaustion pulling her down. Inside, Elias laid out bread and beans from the stove. Simple, humble fare, but warm enough to chase away the cold. Clara devoured her meal, still trembling beneath the towel wrapped tight around her. Abigail ate slowly, her gaze never leaving Elias, trying to decipher whether this rough rancher was truly the sanctuary they so desperately needed. The night's darkness pressed down like a heavy blanket, swallowing the ranch in a silence so thick it made every creek and branch in the woods seem to whisper louder than they should. Abigail hurried to help Clara settle close to the flickering fire, her hands trembling as she fought to steady herself. Meanwhile, Elias sat unmoving by the window, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon where shadows crept closer with each passing second. He knew trouble was creeping in. There's no humiliating an outlaw without paying a price. Suddenly, the sound of pounding hooves shattered the night stillness. Shadows slipped silently into the yard, 4 men dismounting with deliberate slowness. Rifles hung loosely over their shoulders, pistols glinting ominously at their hips. Abigail's breath hitched, frozen in her chest. Clara's grip tightened around her hand, her knuckles whitening as fear gripped her throat. Without knocking, the front door swung open on creaking hinges, revealing him, Nathaniel Carter. His scar, pale and slick with sweat, caught the flickering firelight as his cold eyes locked onto Elias like a predator sizing its prey. "Hand them over, brother." Nathaniel's voice rumbled low and heavy, thick with menace. Abigail's head jerked sharply toward Elias, confusion and dread swirling in her mind. Her gaze darted back and forth between the two men, trying to grasp what this revelation meant. Clara's gasp was swallowed by the night as she tugged her towel tighter around her trembling shoulders. Elias rose slowly, his broad shoulders squared, every inch of him radiating quiet resolve. "Nathaniel," Elias said, voice steady but heavy with weariness. "You always believed the world owed you more. I couldn't stop you then, but I won't let you take what's not yours now." The air around them grew so thick it seemed to crackle, a silent warning of the storm about to erupt. The other outlaws shifted nervously, fingers twitching near their guns, waiting for Nathaniel's command. Guns gleamed coldly under the faint glow of the lanterns. But Elias made no move to draw his weapon. The tension hung like a noose, every second stretching tighter, more dangerous than the last. The question hung in the air. Would Elias finally draw, or was he willing to risk everything to stand his ground? In the shadowed silence of that dusty room, a moment hung so heavy you could almost taste the grit. Nathaniel took a step forward, his eyes locked onto his brother's like a gun's barrel aimed at his soul. "Look at yourself," he growled. "Once, you wore a soldier's badge. You fought for something. Is this the legacy you want? Selling women like they're cattle, like they're nothing?" For a heartbeat, Nathaniel's jaw clenched tight, and a flicker of something dark and raw crossed his face. Perhaps regret, perhaps shame. Without hesitation, he raised his pistol, its cold steel aimed directly at Elias's chest. Abigail's cry pierced the tense air, but Elias stood as unmoving as the ancient oak outside. "If blood must be spilled tonight," Elias said softly, voice barely more than a whisper, "let it be mine. The girls stay here." The room was frozen in time, thick with unspoken pain and unyielding resolve, like molasses dripping from a broken jar. Then slowly, Nathaniel lowered his gun, the weight of it dragging his arm down. His voice cracked just enough to betray him as he turned to his men. "We're done here. Let's go." The gang filed out, leaving behind only a cloud of dust and an oppressive sense of dread. Nathaniel paused in the doorway, his back to Elias, voice low with a warning. "This isn't over," he muttered into the night, then vanished into the darkness. Abigail and Clara were left trembling, clutching each other like fragile glass in a storm, as Elias shut the door behind them. For now, he had protected them. But the question lingered in the fire-lit room, thick as smoke. What price would Elias pay for saving these women, when even his own blood had turned against him? That night, as the moon cast long shadows over the ranch, a weight pressed heavier on Elias than ever before. The silence inside those wooden walls felt almost deafening. Abigail and Clara sat close to the dying embers, still trembling from the horrors they'd nearly endured. Elias said nothing, his face etched with the burden of what he'd just done. His own kin had come to the door with a gun, yet he had chosen to stand firm for two women who weren't blood, who weren't kin, who needed him most. By dawn, the Texas sun spilled across the arid fields, streaking the sky in gold. Clara made her choice. She wanted to return to what was left of her family, to piece together the broken fragments of her life. Elias saddled her horse, watching her ride away, tears glistening in her eyes, but a faint smile on her lips. Hope flickering in her soul. Abigail, however, stayed behind. She'd lost everything, her past, her future, her certainty. Yet here, in the quiet of the ranch, she saw a man who'd risked his life for her without asking for anything in return. She remained, first to mend her wounds, then to lend a hand around the place. Days stretched into weeks, and amid the steady rhythm of chores, feeding horses, repairing fences, a quiet bond began to take root. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was as steady as the earth beneath their boots. For Elias, a man convinced his best years had already slipped away, Abigail's presence became proof that even the most broken souls could find a new dawn. One thing stands out unmistakably. That scorching summer of 1892, deep in the heart of Texas, where the air shimmered with heat and unspoken tension. On that quiet ranch, redemption wasn't just a word scribbled in dusty ledgers or whispered in the shadows. No, it was a choice carved into the soul of a battered rancher, whose worn hands bore the scars of years lost, fighting for a future he barely recognized. Standing beside him was a young woman, her eyes blazing with stubborn fire, refusing to let despair or hardship silence her spirit.